not the sewer of social media.
Yeah.
This is the
Sometimes
opposite.
you get some good stuff.
That's right. This from Paul and Leitner is how I would say his name.
And Leitner?
Yeah.
Maybe?
Either way, he is...
It's kind of like Matt Leinart with the L-E-I. So
Leitner?
saying light and Leitner.
So he studies and speaks on the intersection of religion and culture, meeting science and philosophy. If I saw this, I would be like, okay, the culture part is intriguing. But he has no background whatsoever in politics. But we do see the two intersect often. And so he put this out there in a thread that says, hear me out. And he says, wait till the end. And it is fantastic in how he has pieced this together. Some of the signs that a cultural shift has been brewing for years in America that most of the professional political analysts just completely missed. He goes, some may see absurd, and they do at times on the individual front of the point he's making. Let's start with the first one. The popular success of Top Gun Maverick. Chad, this is right in your lane.
Yeah, and he says, after the killing of George Floyd and the subsequent protests and rioting in 2020, it seemed to many in the intelligentsia that culturally relevant films needed to directly address DEI or systemic race issues to find wide appeal. Top Gun Maverick instead leaned heavily on classic modernist heroism themes embodied by a white male protagonist, Tom Cruise's Maverick, who is a traditional rule-breaking figure dedicated to honor, duty, and meritocracy. Maverick represented more traditional American values of meritocracy over aristocracy amid what was supposed to be a cultural revolution intended to set up a new inverted aristocracy. Hutton, we talked about this a lot in the moment,
yes,
and then in the years after it. Not just the massive appeal and success of the box office. This was America's return to the box office post-COVID. This was the first huge hit, and it brought people together. It got people cheering in the movie theaters. It united people.
And Tom Cruise demanded that it was in the theater.
And there was a lot of talk even then about, boy, it's nice not to be force-fed some woke stuff.
Yes.
Or nonsense on this, or pushed an agenda.
Yeah.
I mean, even in the movie, the villain in the end, we don't even know what country they're from. It is an unnamed, we think Russia probably, based on the landscape of where the mission happens, but they don't say Russia. It's just another country.
No hidden agenda.
And it is very American. There's a lot of jingoism involved with American military, but you got to see the American might of our military power, courage, all those things. It was a throwback to the 80s and 90s in a lot of ways. And guess what people were craving in that moment? That throwback. So that's a great indicator of what led to the 2024 election and Donald Trump. And that's just the first one that he threw out.
Cultural influence. The anti-woke comedians. And you could certainly go on and go further than the ones he mentions, but he's comparing the anti-woke comedians. Tony Hinchcliffe, who is on stage at Madison Square Garden for Trump's rally. You've got, of course, Rogan and his popularity, but also Theo Von and more. And he wraps this up by just saying, none of these guys would get along with Franklin Graham or any of the older cultural bastions of the Republican Party, but their total disdain for what became known as wokeism and the complete disregard for any sense of politically correct language appeals to many working class men. And that has that's played a part of the shift of the cultural influences and what we've seen here in the shift.
Shane Gillis, another big one that is now selling out stadiums. That's a big non-woke, I would say, comedian. Bill Burr in a lot of ways. Bill Burr's going to host SNL on Saturday night post-Trump election, which should be interesting. He's another one that doesn't abide by and most comedians. I mean, Jerry Seinfeld has spoken out against wokeism or political correctness in comedy, and he's a guy who doesn't curse, for the most part. He's pretty clean as a stand-up comic.
Right. And it's that lane, though.
I think Nate Bargatze would agree with Joe Rogan and people on their stance on comedy needs to be comedy, and you got to protect the comedic space. So all these signs were pointing to that. And the Tony Hinchcliffe one is the one that I thought about on Tuesday night, because if you would have watched legacy media, mainstream media, in the build-up to the election, you would have thought that Puerto Rican voters all over America were going to cross Donald Trump off their ballot because Tony Hinchcliffe made that one joke about
Right.
Puerto Rico being a floating pile of garbage in the ocean. And what happened instead? He did way better with the Puerto Rican community in Pennsylvania that ended up helping him win the election than in 2020. Because why? As this person is pointing out, most everyday average Americans don't care about jokes. They care about the price of milk and eggs and gas. That's what they care more about.
Chad, there certainly others we're going to dive into, but he mentions the corporations making cuts in DEI programs. It wasn't that long ago. It was all the rage. You had to do this, right? Or you're canceled.
Yep.
And it's
in wake of the George Floyd protests and everything else, that was it.
Now we're seeing companies dropping these programs. Enrollment surging in K through 12 Christian schools. Yep. You certainly know this.
Yeah, I think this is twofold, by the way. The post-COVID spike, I think this is my situation. Mm-hmm. We started in pre-K and K in a private Christian school, and our plan was to put our children in public school. I went to public school. My wife went to public school. That was the plan. And then COVID happened, and you start to realize, boy, the government and local jurisdiction, they sure do have a lot of say in our child's education and when they're in school and when they're not. Even if it's going to cost some money, I'd rather have more say in their education. And now we're sticking with a private Christian school throughout, and it's one of the best decisions that we've made. So I'm an example of this, but there are countless examples all over the country for the same reason. Whether it be they were learning in school or some agenda based on what state you live in and wanting to get away from that, I think that, yes, this is a big part of it. Clay's talked about it a lot too. Suburban moms and the fighting back with COVID restrictions and what's being taught in schools was a very, very powerful tool for Donald Trump to get elected again. That was huge, and this is an example of that.
The Star Wars, Disney creation of Star Wars, the wars of wars between the diehards and get your damn hands off my Jedi, and what Disney was trying to make this into some, progressive movement, some woke movement of turning everything into those that, feel like they've been underappreciated. And if you're against it, you're canceled. Well, the Alkali was canceled.
It's funny because there's a podcast to listen to that gets in a lot of TV and movie culture, and the two hosts are very much against they call it the Star Wars bro, who's mad about any change to their Star Wars with women or minority characters or whatever it may be.
With the clear agenda of what they're changing.
I think that because of the backlash we've seen of numbers struggling on Disney Plus with some of these series, it's not just the Star Wars bro that doesn't like it. Yeah. It's everyone that maybe likes their Star Wars the way Star Wars was in the 1970s when it was launched.
Or the remake of a Disney film.
Right. That's not going back to point number one.
Right.
Top Gun Maverick as a blueprint for everyone else to follow that success.
And the point of K through 12 Christian schools.
Yes.
That's also part of it. And this is right up Davy's alley.
Oh, this is the
probably
one
why he sent us this.
This is the crescendo here for Davey.
The meta-modern resurgence of Creed.
This is really it. This sums up everything.
Look at the graphic that comes with this. So you have Sincerity, early Creed, where Creed is awesome, and then the deconstructive cynicism of Creed. Creed is corporate butt rock.
Corporate butt rock?
And then you have the ironic criticism in the postmodern era of Creed. Creed is awesome, LOL, with Erm's word Erpen is what it says, which is funny. I mean, again, they're the butt of the joke, but they're also, people are listening to it. And then the meta-modern now, the post-ironic sincerity. Creed is awesome again.
Just amazing.
I
think this is in line with the comeback of Top Gun Maverick and everything else. Just a simpler time. When Creed was singing with arms wide open, it was a much simpler time than America, and that's what people crave for. Like Davey, he craves that simpler time. Speaking of Tom Cruise and Top Gun Maverick, they're going to make a Days of Thunder sequel now.
Really?
Because he saw the success of Top Gun Maverick. So there will be a Days of Thunder 2. I don't know what that exact title is going to be. Probably not Days of Thunder 2.
Hopefully they see the success in the theater aspect of it.
So Top Gun came out in 1986, the original. Days of Thunder was 1990, 4 years later, and now 35 years probably when it's released. After that, you're going to get a sequel.
We could go in a deeper dive with all these, and we should.
Yes.
With many of them. But Paul Antleiter is the one to go follow with more on this.
I gave old Paul Antleitner a follow
I did too.
because of this one.
I did too.